Good evening, everybody. This is Brian Powers, and thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio for NJRR Live. And tonight we're going to talk with Afrika, an activist out of New Jersey, Newark, New Jersey. And he's kind of taken up the mantle of what we saw a lot of Black Panthers do and patrolling the police, which is both dangerous, courageous, and something that maybe communities should be doing more. So we're going to have Afrika join us, and as well as another editorial board member, Ben Zarofsky, who's an attorney out of Newark, New Jersey as well. I don't think he practices his offices in New York anymore, but he was in Newark for a long time, represented a lot of activists, and is going to give us some legal perspective on that. So stay tuned. We are going to have Bennett and Afrika on pretty soon. But before that, I'm going to be joined by my comrade Christian Perez, and we're going to do Joe or Schmo again, which is, I think this will be the third time we've done Joe or Schmo. The first time, got to give credit to the title, Joe or Schmo, to our writer, Leah. Thanks, Leah, for your contribution. And we did one show, and then we did it at our live event at the Olive Press Eatery in Metuchen, New Jersey. And so tonight, we're once again going to look around the world of national politics and give some critiques with a particular eye on what our President Joe Biden has been doing. So, in the headlines, I guess I've seen a lot of Olympic stuff. I've been myself watching the Olympics. I like sporting events. I like watching the Olympics. I've been a football fan and a baseball fan, and so I enjoy watching the Olympics. And I think, it's hard to ignore the talk of, Simone Biles and her standing up for her own mental health. And, it comes with, I'm glad that we are recognizing in our society that mental health is a real thing. But, in my years of representing employees at work and seeing how employers operate, it really didn't mean a lot to me, knowing that in most workplaces, if you try to call out sick or try to get some time to take care of your mental health, that what the world isn't as understanding. And I think that what hopefully Simone Biles has done is created conversations in workplaces about what healthcare really means and what we need to do to start recognizing the effects of capitalism on our health. And I think that Simone Biles is in a unique position as somebody who's considered the greatest of all time in her career, a title that's well earned and deserved. So that gives her a certain amount of leverage on her employer, or whatever's going on, that isn't usually matched by your average factory worker or social worker or sanitation worker. And it's for me, as somebody who comes on here every week or so and does a podcast preaching and saying that I'm anti-capitalist, that I'm a communist, that I'm a socialist, I'm an eco-socialist. I'd be hard pressed to be overjoyed when I know that those same considerations are not afforded to the proletariat. So I would say that if given the chance in your workplace to accommodate somebody with a mental health issue, what do you do now that your consciousness has been raised? Right? What do we do as workers or as people who are managing workplaces and things of that nature? Like, what lesson are you taking out of this that you actually apply in the real world every day? Or are you just liking something on Facebook again? Are you rooting on this woman who stood up for herself until the Olympics are over, and then it's back to firing the guy who took too many mental health days last year? Or are you really going to change policy and change attitudes and change cultures, in the workplace? And I hope, and I think things like this do move stuff forward. So, I hope it's one of those moments in history where we move forward particularly if it's something that could help people cope better with what they got to deal with in their workplaces under capitalism. So that's what I wanted to add my little 2 cents about that before I bring in my comrade Christian Perez. And
How we
there
doing,
he
Brian?
is. Good, brother. What's going on, man?
Not much. I'm glad that you were speaking on Simone Biles. I think that that's really important, man. And like, she's someone who doesn't have anything to prove to anyone. I think the best meme I saw was somebody said that she's being criticized by people who didn't have the guts to wear a mask, right? I mean, I mean, just in terms of optics, I mean, she's somebody who stole the show no matter what. She's the greatest there is. She's probably the greatest there's ever been in terms of gymnastics. I'm not really a big follower of gymnastics, but she has the accolades, right? Someone of her stature with literally the eyes of the world on her to take time off to talk about mental health, especially in a sport where she could end up crippled. I mean, because if you see her, she's like 24 years old. She's like a small little ball of muscle. She's like, like a little pit bull, man. She's all muscle. So she starts flinging herself around. She lands on a shoulder, an elbow, God forbid her neck. For her to talk about mental health and like just the need to keep her head on straight, it's incredibly important. And we see her being criticized. We forget that Michael Jordan took like how many seasons off after winning championships, and he wasn't held to the same standard as he wasn't given the same criticism that Simone Biles is today. So I really commend her for standing up, and I think it's good that you brought light to that, because especially when it comes to mental health, and we've seen that in places. People like to support track. They don't like to support when it's in there, it's in front of them. So they can support Simone Biles for, speaking out about mental health. But like you said, Brian, if there's a coworker, on the job, it's very easy to place blame or dislike, or, we could even, it's not inconceivable to hear of employers pushing somebody for taking health days. It's still something that's taboo.
Exactly. So we wanted to talk about our president, Mr. Biden, and there was a moratorium on evictions and foreclosures.
Thankfully.
And I actually didn't know. I think I had heard it, but I guess I didn't absorb it, that the CDC was the ones that had put out this order as related to COVID. And they were not going to put out another order, and Joe Biden wasn't going to put out another order, so they left it to Congress. And just, I believe today, as we were preparing for the show, it might have been as early as yesterday, that they did extend that moratorium until October. But it took some time and debate, which really seems odd given the current state of things in the country and why we would be throwing people out of their house. Well, landlords are crying, to the banks are crying, and all the rich people are crying. So let's throw poor people out of their homes.
Yeah, I mean, this would disproportionately affect families of color, in particular Black families. I heard something like 15 million people, 0.5 million households run the risk of being evicted. So, I mean, this is incredibly important. Like millions of Americans are in danger of losing their housing. And I mean, like just the foot dragging in Congress, Republicans aren't going to do anything, right? I mean, it's up to the Democrats. And unfortunately, we live in a world where we don't see the enthusiasm for progress from our elected leaders. I mean, they're on the take, man. They're shills. So, like, there shouldn't be an issue, unfortunately, dealing with evictions. But this is how we're stuck. We're stuck. If this is the multiverse, we're in one of the least fun realities, right? We're in the one where, the president basically elected on a mandate to smash everything about Trump. He's just electing not to. He's just not going to do it. So, that's where we're at. I mean, but I've been saying, and I'm on the record here, Biden is uninspiring and low energy. And, all that has come true. And but we knew that, Brian. Our listeners know that. Everyone here knows it.
So some of the battles that Joe Biden has picked and chosen not to fight stand out more than the battles he has fought. We go back, we're being critical of him for the $15 an hour minimum wage. But there's also been the Medicare for All proposals, which he really didn't campaign for Medicare for All.
No, he said he wasn't signing the legislation if he had it. right? I mean, that was he from day one. He said it's not going to go to the Senate, but he said even if it did, he wouldn't sign it.
Which has had the effect of deflating Congress and a lot of Democratic activists, right? So,
Yeah,
like, you don't see the fight, and I know, we had some hoopla around the right wing being involved, but there was plenty of legitimate protest out there for medical care for all from groups that are actually trying to get a positive narrative going about it. So,
yeah,
I think. It, it's not only that he's blocking legislation, not signing legislation, but the air comes out of the sails when the Democratic Party is in charge.
yeah.
And we could also turn to a big schmo category, which is foreign policy, and we recently read that Somalia is now getting bombed by the United States, or has continued to be bombed by the United
It's
States,
always
and
something.
we've sent, we've targeted Syria. We continue to support Israel in their, taking of Palestinian lands, and we haven't heard anything, really since the flare up in tensions. But nothing's gotten any better in Palestine for the Palestinian people. But the ability, I guess, what really amazes me, and when I look at, the power of the Democratic Party and how encompassing it can be at times, is their absolute tenacity in seeing a hot issue, which could result in real policy change. For instance, like this, the many, many flare ups in violence in the Middle East. I don't have to point to one, there's like dozens of them every week at this point. And any one of them can be used as a flashpoint for positive change, for meaningful dialogue, for a shift in policy. But instead, we may see a news report on it or a big social media push on it for a couple of weeks, but they have the ability to just all of a sudden just suppress that, I guess, momentum, you would describe it, and it just fizzles out and winds up the status quo continues. And
Yeah. That's their role. Yeah, I mean it's frustrating because I get into it with a lot of my far lefty friends who are like, "See, told you the Democrats were shady." I'm like, I've known that, right? I've known that my entire adult life, right? I know, like I know that, right? But Joe Biden's thing will fundamentally change, right? This is why I mean I'm a Democrat, but I'm not really a Democrat license. I'm a member of the party. I don't get involved. I'm not a liberal. Right. I did it so that I could vote for Bernie Sanders in the primary, so that I could vote in primaries here in New Jersey. Right. I don't go to party meetings. I haven't been to a party meeting since 2016. And that was when I was working on Peter Jacobs' cane. I'm not a liberal. Like, I don't know. But this is, I'm rambling, but this is what the Democratic Party does. I mean, when we had our, when we were at the the Olive Branch Eatery, I said it. I used was the Democratic Party is the grave of progress, right? I mean,
have you ever been to a Democratic Party? Have you been to a local Democratic Party meeting, like a town meeting or a county, maybe like a small?
Yeah, like once or twice years ago, but it wasn't.
Do you remember that experience? Like, I'm curious to know, like,
not really,
what your experiences were, because I went to exactly
I remember
two
there
town.
was like, yeah, I remember so there's obviously like, yeah, I mean, there's your more liberal corporate Democrats who think, still think that, Al Gore ran a great campaign or whatever, right? There's still those people who are mad at Ralph, just that older wave of right. These are people that hate Bernie Sanders because he's not a real Democrat. Try to ask them, like, what is a real Democrat? But it's a lot of people talking over each other because are usually more progressive people, and then you're usually older or centrist or backing liberal. I mean, this is like, it's a big part of the Democratic Party. Are these people that legitimately that Democratic leadership has everything figured out? It wasn't it wasn't an inspiring thing. I mean, and this is years ago. I mean, it might change, but it didn't. It wasn't an experience where I'm like, wow, like this is good. This is how things are going to happen. It's inspiring for me.
Um, some of the other things I've been trying to look at for change, which have stalled out. And I honestly, I one of the things I wish, I had more time and more resources here. Revolution would have had a little more attention to the ongoing immigration crisis, which has really not gotten any better. I mean, I think that, they've changed some terminology as to what they do when they put people in cages and separate families and do these kinds of things at the border. There are still children missing in this system from when they were initially separated. There's a lot that really hasn't gotten fixed with immigration. And again, another fire that we saw where we could have had real change was Kamala Harris not going to the border and making those completely asinine comments. Was it in Colombia that she made those? What country did she say don't come here?
It was either Central America, so it was Guatemala or El Salvador. I don't remember off the top of my head. I want to say it's Guatemala where she went, but yeah, I mean, like I was reading a tweet from guy Sam Yang from the Southpaw podcast, and it was about how American propaganda is propaganda omission, right? They just don't teach us things. It's
Right.
not that it's not like, where you think of like your textbook terrorism, the enemy is evil, the enemy is this. It's not 1984. It's just, they just don't tell Americans things. And the backlash with critical race theory, we see it with when we're, Bennett is saying that he's attended many local Democratic committee meetings, but yeah, I mean, it's Americans don't know. Americans don't know that a lot of the violence in America is the result of American foreign policy. Americans don't know basic things about politics and history. I mean, that's like I said, that's the rage behind critical race theory. It's the rage behind, political correctness and all that. It's entire segment of society not being able to deal with the truth or, just reality as it is.
Yeah. And Sam Yang, of course, we did a show here on Revolution Radio. I'm sure you can
Good guy.
Take a look in our archives. We got a search bar on our website. And I'm sure our crack staff will provide some links on the blog post that accompany this podcast. And so let's do our commercial break. With that, I honestly, I mean, I think there's still a lot to be critical of Joe Biden, but I think, the term inaction, the kind of just it just is an appropriate descriptor for the administration, and I don't see a lot changing until we have some type of revolutionary, independent, activist base, which is not so algorithmically tied to the trends of the Democratic Party. We really do need activists that are activists. We really do need journalists that do journalism. We really do need that kind of proletariat narrative that's out there, I think, to counter, Republicans and Democrats, because neither of them at this point really speak about the issues I think that, most Americans do care about. And that's why you see low voter turnout and the radicalization of the right too is really a part of this whole thing that I'm describing. And what can you do about it? Well, you can support independent journalism right here at Revolution Radio. You can go to www.njrevolutionradio.com. You can make a donation, or you can become a member of our editorial board. Our editorial board contributes by way of financially sustaining the organization, helping to pay for our staff and the upkeep of all our platforms, as well as ideas for stories and reports. And, this is really the base of support that, independent media needs. We don't want to just be watching CNN and regurgitating the nonsense that we hear from corporate media, but being able to have people that support this network, both financially and, with their activism, because those are the people that we follow on social media, that we talk to in the DMs, that we talk to on the phone, that we do the video conferences with. And that's where the idea for some of our stories come out. And a great example is here with us tonight. But before that, I want to make sure that Christian gets to plug anything that he would like to plug. I'm not sure if he got anything out there for the revolutionary community, but let us know about that, brother.
I've been busy this week, but I just released a couple of those on YouTube. If you can check them out, try to get me a couple views. Just check out my page, Modernity and Absurd, on YouTube. You could check me out on Twitter at Perez Podcast. Like I said, I'm not the biggest online person. I don't really love Twitter. I feel like Twitter is a distraction, especially for a lot of people on the left. I feel like Twitter is causing a lot of unnecessary division among the left. And I also fully believe Twitter doesn't really have the power that people think it does. But that being said, I am on Twitter. And you can follow me on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on YouTube. And please go back to the archives. Check out the old Revolution Radio interviews that we're doing. I mean, we've been doing this a couple of years now. I've been, I think my first video started popping up in 2019 was when you first asked me to come on. So, check it out. Check out Revolution Radio if you can do it. It falls on organizations like ours to tell the truth.
Yeah, it's been a fun project, man. I mean, it's had its ups and downs, and we're getting ready to take a little vacation time. Idavox is off. We're going to take a few weeks off here, so it's going to be back to full strength mid-September, just so everybody knows. But it's been fun because of being involved with you and making those comrades and doing stuff with comrades, and you actually see the results of your work on a weekly basis here, and on the podcast and all that. And it's steadily growing. So thanks for joining us up. Tonight, we're going to welcome our guests, and we can bring them in now. We're going to bring in Afrika, who's been on the program a number of times, and also Bennett Zarofsky, who is making his second appearance, I think. Maybe his third, I'm not really sure. But Bennett I've known for a very long time, going back to when I did my first rally. I organized my first State House rally ever for 15 now, probably about 7 or 8 years ago. And Bennett and the IUC and the Solidarity Singers wrote a song for the $15 an hour minimum wage. And I remember that was really cool. There was only a couple of activists, and we were pretty young, and I didn't really know what was going on. But it made me feel welcome. I remember it was like okay, you're cool with us here. We even wrote a song about this cause. So Bennett, I don't know if you're there yet.
I'm here, but my camera doesn't seem to be working.
Okay, well, I'm gonna talk to our comrade Afrika first. In Afrika, I'm gonna start off by playing a video that one of the videos, and we got a few clips, but. You're cruising by here, and for those of us who are podcast listeners or checking it out, don't see it. What's going to be happening here is our comrade Afrika is going to be rolling by some police activity in his. This is a hometown of Newark, being patrolled by the Essex County Sheriff Unit. Here we go. So it's going a little slow here, and we don't have audio right now, but I'll tell you that he's driving by 1, 2. And then as he keeps rolling by 3, and then another one. Here we go.
Yo, this is hidden taxes, yo. These are really hidden taxes. This exploitation of the community. Look, yo, every day, man. Every day they're out here. Look, 1, 2, 3, 4. Look at all these cars out here. They just pulling people over. Ain't no space right here for nobody to commit nothing. To do nothing, to run, to violate no traffic laws. There's no space out here. There's nothing. All the people speed.
Now, Afrika, maybe you could tell us really quickly. I said I'd start off with what's happening right now is you're showing your audience and a lot of social media people what the police are doing in your neighborhood. And I think first and foremost, I wanted to bring up safety. We police kill people. I mean, we know that. They'll even kill people on videotape and not be held accountable. And I know we saw a change in the George Floyd case, but still, we know this happens. Are you worried about your approach right now and how aggressive you've been with the Newark PD from a personal standpoint?
Of course. Like, I would have to be very naive. Yeah, I'd have to be naive if I wasn't worried. Like, you got to be worried. These people, they have guns. They are part of the institutions in the community. There are several ways they can target you, not just physically, but there are other ways that they've towed our car, they've done different things, but that's all of that is besides the point. At some point, we all have to get tired of it. We have to get tired of them exploiting our community, and we have to stand up and say something about it. But of course, people asked me. A few people asked me, and they told me, "Look, man, if the police see something wrong, like the police see you dead on the streets, hurt, or they see your family, they're not gonna help you because they're gonna be like they're gonna see you and they're gonna know who you are." Like people said a whole bunch of different things to me, but I tell them the same thing that I'm telling you now. It really don't matter. And sometimes we have to say something because they target us anyway. I mean, and those videos are systematic ways in which they target us. If you want me to go into the video, I'll go into it. You want me to go into the video too?
Yeah, well, let me show the other another quick clip. I'm not sure if you actually took this video or it was something that you had shared, but I wanted you on this first video. We see what looks to be a police officer going to grab a guy, but not like really putting him under arrest, like basically going to grab him. The guy kind of slaps the police officer away, and it turns into a wrestling match, and then a female police officer kind of comes out of nowhere and punches the dude in the face. I mean, the civilian, and it seems to be like this rapid escalation. You know, and I was wondering, do you know the video I'm talking about that we're about to pull up?
I know what you're talking about.
Was that? Did you take that video, or was that something you had found on Facebook?
No, one of the boys that I coached, because I've been working in the community for like over 12 years. One of the boys I coached like 12 years ago sent me the video of his family being brutalized, and he asked me what they could do.
Here it is, right here. Now, all right, so then we can move on to the last video. We could talk about this one really quickly. So now, was that in Newark, Africa?
Yes, that's down the street from the last video.
Right. I got you. And so while Leah pulls up the third video, let me ask you, what happened there? I mean, has there been any kind of investigation or any progress since that video went public?
No. Well, but these are two different incidents. This incident, this video that we're looking at right here, this is from June 1st. This is a whole different case. This is the Rodwell family. The police have been targeting their family since June 1st when they jumped out the car and they frisked the four brothers, assaulted them and locked them up, and charged them with resisting arrest and assaulting a police officer. And then they went on the media. Like there's a lot of different media stories saying that there was a brawl, that the boys took the guns from the police, that they were assaulting the police. But when the video came out, we got to see that none of that was true, that the police jumped out and started assaulting them. And right now, that big police truck that you see is parked in front of their house. It's like they intimidate them. They had the police, they had probably like 5, 6, 7 different cop cars all on their block and blocking off the entrance to the street. So all this manpower is being focused on the family because the police know they're wrong and they're trying to intimidate the family and not going on, like not challenging them legally.
But this is, this is the one. Okay.
Yeah, the police.
You're approaching people without body cams on. There's no video to record or document what you guys are doing when you're
recording us now, right?
But where's your guys's? Know what I'm saying? Aren't you guys? Where's your office? Where's all your officers' body cam?
Okay, where's your dad?
You guys are officers, detectives. What are you? What do you want to be referred as?
That's not your concern.
You know what I'm saying? Where's your body cam?
All right. That's the part I want to get to, and that's why, of course, we have Attorney Bennett Zarofsky with us today. And Bennett, we're going to have a little bit of a wider discussion about police resources and how they're being used. But that piece of video troubled me right there because Africa, who were they? I mean, were they detectives? Were they? Do we ever identify who these guys are?
They don't answer to the community. The person you heard questioning them was a neighbor of the family that was being targeted. Those officers were just staying there monitoring the home of this family that they had abused on June 1st. And this is a daily occurrence when they wake up in the morning. I think that was like 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. When they got up in the morning, the police is already stationed in front of their house. Intimidated. Like when they open the door sometime, the police is on the porch, on their porch. And they've had them, they're recording them on their porch. Like just imagine you wake up on a daily basis and the police are directly in front of your steps, right in front of your house. When you walk out to go to work, they're sitting there. They're not there because you've committed a crime, that you've done anything. They're just there to intimidate you. And these things are not in the media. The Democratic Party, the Republican Party, whatever media, they don't talk about these issues. I mean, it's like that is why it's important to create platforms like this on our own so we could highlight these issues. But these are the things we go through on a daily basis. Tomorrow, they're still going to be there when these kids wake up. The police is going to be stationed there in front of their house, intimidating them. I mean, they had a vote. They had. I don't want to go too far, but they had a voter registration drive to try to fight back against the police and those in power that are doing nothing. The police shut it down. The police shut the voter registration down. They put up yellow tape and they stopped it. They stopped them from organizing. I mean, but like this is what we deal with.
Yeah. So Ben, let me bring Ben in. What I think we should maybe do is talk about some of these police tactics and kind of see them as escalating tactics. And as far as some of these community patrols, now you had in one videotape where it seemed like an undercover police officer was walking back and forth in a crosswalk looking for violations. And I have seen this as a police tactic in other towns. So what the police will do is they'll have somebody with a radio, and then there'll be police cars up and down the block ready to pull people over as he identifies violations. And that could be a seatbelt or, maybe talking on the cell phone or running through the intersection and not stopping for a pedestrian. It seems to be this isn't something just being put in order, because I saw this in Edison, New Jersey, as a matter of fact, and then I talked to some other friends and said, yes, they've seen this before. So, Bennett, when I talked about this, we said most of these operations are legal, but maybe you could expand upon like what kind of crimes could be committed, what kind of things people could be charged with during these operations, and what kind of penalties they hold.
Well, if you're only talking about driving violations, they can only be charged, assuming that the police are not fabricating things, which isn't always a safe assumption. But they can only be charged with things that they observe, because they have to testify in order to prove the case eventually in court. So in the case of someone walking in a crosswalk, and reporting incidents to another officer who then pulls the driver over, you're talking about moving violations of various sorts. And, in some places, it's important to enforce those laws. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've been in crosswalks which drivers disrespect and had some close calls. And of course, in a city like New York, there, is a constant battle with pedestrian fatalities. And there's been a lot of public pressure on the police to try and take more steps to reduce pedestrian fatalities. So some of that work is appropriate work. It's a question of whether they're always being deployed for appropriate purposes, such as enforcing safety laws where they have reason to believe there's been problems, or whether they're being enforced for what I would say improper purposes, which is they're principally trying to raise money for the town by writing as many people up as they can with things like ticket quotas and, as we saw as things were developed around Ferguson, but in many cities where it seems to especially target the poor and where there's accelerating penalties if you don't pay your fine on time, if you don't show up in court, and it becomes a way of keeping poor people down, or sometimes, of course, keeping black people or Hispanic people under control. In other words, for example, if they're doing what you say and they're only pulling over the black or Hispanic drivers, or aren't pulling over the white drivers who are committing the same violations that they're observing, if you could prove that to be the case, that's racial discrimination. And, there may be remedies for it. I mean, that's the type of thing that when the Justice Department comes in and audits police departments in a city, like they did in Newark, and as in the last years of the Obama administration, they were doing in more and more places, they can detect because they gather enough of a record of what's going on that they can, make their case and hopefully get a consent order or go to court if necessary, but usually towns surrender once they finish doing their investigation if they reach these conclusions. And those things had a big effect. Of course, when the Trump administration came in, he cut all those out and said, the Department of Justice shouldn't be doing this. They should only be enforcing the law against real criminals, not against police officers. And there was tremendous backsliding in places where there had been progress. So, the type of activity that you describe falls well within that.
So I want to ask Africa, let me play devil's advocate for you, Africa. I bet you, and I will bet you, if I walked around Newark and showed what you were doing and this particular operation, I'm going to leave the other more serious issues aside for now, but tell the people in Newark, listen, cops are out there, they're pulling people over. I bet you most of them, a good majority, would say, good, that's what I want the police to do. I don't want people running over pedestrians. I don't want people speeding through my neighborhoods where my kids play. And I think this is a good thing. So there's a public perception out there, I think, with police, that this is a positive thing for the community. And I think, you and I, to argue that this is a bad thing, we'd be in the minority of people. So why explain to me, let's just say I have the opinion that this is great, this is in my community, and I want people to stop for pedestrians. What's your problem, Africa?
All right. If you come to Newark, how the people in Newark, the residents of Newark think, and how the residents of people that live in Morristown, Cranford, or different areas like that see the police are totally different. Because our lived reality are not the same. When I post these videos on my social media platforms, all the people that live in Newark, that live in these communities, are against the police. They hate the police. They say things like, they got me last week. They got me 2 weeks ago. They just got my father for that. The police are not here. You know what? Look, let me slow down. Let me go back a second. Because you guys were talking about this in the beginning, how Biden wasn't doing nothing. He's doing nothing on immigration. No $15. No Medicare for all. Nothing. He's done zip. While he's been bombing other countries, they're telling immigrants, don't come to our borders. They still have the cages. They still oppressing people at the border. These institutions that we are all invested in, that our tax dollars help to fund, don't work for us. We understand that. That's why we say we're socialists, we're communists, we're this, because we understand those institutions don't work. The police department is under those institutions that is oppressing us and taking money from us, from the workers. And they work for the people that control those institutions. So now when the police come and they tell me yo, we doing this for your benefit. But when you watch them with your eyes, they step in the street when you're like a car length away. And because you're a car length away, it's true. Like if you hit the brakes, you're going to come to a full stop. And sometimes people go around. Like you can physically watch what they're doing. And they deliberately wait until they see like you're close to step in the street. Sometimes you don't even see them because they're on the other side of the street and you keep going and they give you a ticket. What I'm saying is what they're doing, it's not for public safety. There's no equivocation about this. We know public safety. They could stand on the sidewalk with a sign, slow down, don't speed. They could do things like that. They could put up a blinking yellow sign. There's a number of things they could do to make sure people don't speed. They could even put a red light. They could put a light there, but they refuse to do any of that. They get about 8 police cars with 2 people in each car. These are all people that we are paying. And then they have someone stepping in the street and trapping people into cases. Now, when they give you that ticket, and if let's say you don't get the ticket in the mail, it happened to me before, and you don't even know about it, they suspend your license. You can't go to work, and when the police get you, you're going straight to jail. Let's say you do get on the Zoom call, because everything is on the Zoom call, because it happened to me before. You can't get on because you have bad connection. Yo, they will put a warrant out on you, even though you're on a Zoom call. And I have all these things documented. They're on my page where a judge is putting a warrant on me because I was 30 minutes late to the Zoom call, even though I've been trying to get on for like over 2 hours and my lawyer wasn't there. But all these things are not documented. People don't see this. So like somebody that's living in Livingston can be watching the video, or the police are out there doing their job. But they don't understand the police in Newark are under a consent decree because they've already been found guilty of violating people's constitutional rights, of targeting people, of being racist. This is, as we speak right now, the police in Newark are under a consent decree. So we already have the evidence that they're not working in our best interest. And still nothing is being done. Who can I report to on the consent decree? What's his name, Patience? Harvey something. But we've sent them emails. We've tried to call him. We try to find his number on the internet. You can't find none of these people because these institutions don't care about the people. And we must.
Let me. I want to ask Bennett. Maybe he could give it. What is? I mean, I heard a lot about the consent decree, and I know Afrika. You know the details about this particular consent decree. But can I get a general definition? What is a consent decree? What does it mean? What does it do? I don't know.
Well, a consent decree is a settlement of a lawsuit. I mean, that's what it is. So what a consent decree says depends upon what the lawsuit is about. In the case of these police department consent decrees, they are usually doing an investigation, and before they actually file a lawsuit, they write to the city and say, we're getting ready to file this complaint. This is what it's going to say. You know, you want to meet with us, and let's see if we can resolve these things without litigation. Or sometimes they file the lawsuit and then they negotiate. But the consent decree, which is how most of these are resolved, frankly, it's how most litigation is resolved of any type. Overwhelmingly, very few cases go to full trial. And even those that go to full trial are often settled by consent decrees when an appeal is taken by the losing party or something. So, I mean, that's what a consent decree is. There's a particular type of consent decree geared to the Justice Department investigators and you know, what they do. And they, you know, it's hard. A lot of the things that Afrika is referring to could be challenged in court if you gather enough evidence and you have the means to put it across. But very few organizations and certainly very few individuals are in a position to do that. So the Justice Department, when it's operating properly, they have staff which are really excellent. For many years, I served as a special master over the unconstitutional conditions of the jails in Essex County and in Newark. And some of those cases were brought by the New Jersey Public Advocate Office, which used to do a good job when they had a prisoners' rights advocacy section. But then the legislature, in their wisdom, eliminated the prisoner rights advocacy section.
Oh my goodness!
Some of them were done by the federal government. The suit against the Juvenile Detention Center and against the Newark City jails, and they had really excellent attorneys and excellent expert witnesses, and they really, got the goods and could prove it in court. But it's very difficult to prove these in court because, I agree with Afrika. Basically, everybody's working for the people in power, and the people who don't have power,
right?
It's much more difficult. I mean, you really have to prove the case. One of the advantages is when the U.S. government comes in, they're perceived as having the power, right? The judges treat them well. I mean, the ACLU in the past few years has greatly increased its strength and ability. And in the case of Newark, the ACLU was very active in bringing the advocacy that convinced the Department of Justice to come in and do its thing. But then you do have the problems that Afrika referred to. It's not always easy to get in touch with the people who are supposed to be supervising it because it's usually indirect.
Right.
And, it needs a level of sophistication. And again, in the case of Newark, I don't know if Afrika's been in touch with them, but I understand that the ACLU and this organization that they formed, I forget the exact name of it, the Coalition for, I forget the exact name of it, has continued to try and be active in monitoring the police and the consent decree. And I believe the People's Organization for Progress is also involved in that effort. And, I think it's important to get involved in that. I mean, one of the cases that Afrika mentioned with the Rodwell and Spivey brothers, some of those organizations have been involved, and they did get a fair amount of publicity that countered the original stories that were put out by the police that were quite effective. And I think they even got Ras Baraka to make a statement that, although it was in some ways not taking a side, did admit that the police that the story the police put out first was not accurate and had not occurred. I mean, it's unusual in Newark since Ras Baraka is Amiri Baraka's son. He has a very, he's not one to accept what the police say at face value. On the other hand, he is now
his police now.
He's appointed his people to run the police, and he has a lot of confidence in those people. And, Afrika may be in a better position than I am. I mean, I've worked in Newark every day for many years, but I'm obviously a lawyer who commutes in every day from Maplewood. I'm not someone who lives in the neighborhood, But
let's get into a little bit.
It's a very long process. I mean, the process of political organizing. I mean, what was reported about breaking up a voter registration drive, that's something that certainly might be actionable if you have enough documentation that it in fact occurred. The problem is with police all the time. I believe that most police test the lie as much as they testify. But when they appear in court, they're wrapped in credibility. especially in front of juries. And in most judges, some judges are skeptical, but they're outnumbered by the judges who have a tendency to believe, if there's only one person's testimony about the other person's testimony, the police have tremendous advantage. That's why body cameras are so helpful, and it's why citizens like Afrika taking videos are very helpful.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
that's exactly what we saw with George Floyd. But for that video that young woman took, none of that would have gone down. None of that would have gone down. Now, the videos you showed here a few minutes ago, they're very ambiguous without a lot more stuff to put them in context. You don't know what happened. Every time the police use force, it's not improper for them to use force. Every time, there's a dispute. But one of the videos you sent me in advance, which showed a police officer asking for someone's license and registration, and the person was slow getting it out, and the police officer was aggressively reaching into the car and trying to open the door while the guy's saying, "I'm not arrest." I mean, that seems like improper police conduct.
Yeah. There's a lot of it.
Having the video, if that person is facing court, is going to be very helpful to them. The other problem is a lot of these incidents are very small individually. And even if they're wrong, it's hard to get a lawyer like me to take the case because there's not enough damages you can prove. Like a cop hassles you on the street, but he doesn't arrest you. You don't spend any time in jail, right? And you have a bruise, but it's not so bad. It's going to be hard to get a lawyer interested in taking the case, and it's going to get hard to get a court to take the case seriously because, it's just small stuff, which is why these audits
to our system, it's small,
are important. Well, it's not such a small thing to the person, but to the system,
exactly,
which is backlogged with cases. It's a real problem, and a lawyer's got to make a living. There are groups like the ACLU. They can't take everything because they don't have enough people to do every case. They got to choose larger things too. And a lawyer like me, I got to make a living. I can't take a case where I don't think it's gonna, where I'm gonna have a hard time winning it all. And if I win, I'm not gonna get much money. I can't bring a case where I win a couple of grand for the plaintiff, and I've put in $100,000 worth of attorney's fees, even though the law may say I'm entitled to get the attorney's fees if I win. It's going to be tremendously hard to get a judge to award that to me.
I can tell you that I had the opportunity to represent as a union representative, public advocates out of the public defender's office in New Jersey, and they, like you, like every other activist, like people fighting for all these social justice activists, were doing their best with the limited resources that they had. You had mentioned that the office defending, our incarcerated population was shut down, and certainly that took some good and caring people, out of the system. Christian, you've been quiet. I wanted to make sure you check in and see you there. I know that
I wanted to talk
your
about
internet.
my internet is the worst. I got to scream at Comcast, but I wanted to ask Afrika, like in terms of numbers, right? Like, how many times are police pulling people? Oh, actually, here's a biggie. How much money do the police make on these infractions and fines? Because I'm immediately mind of Ferguson when the chief of police said, let's make it a black day, when they were specifically targeting black motorists to raise funds. How much money are we talking in Newark, Afrika? Do you know?
They're making millions and millions. You say what? Patience is the person. That's my wife. She goes with me on the patrol and she helps to record. She said, give them an example. But to get a lawyer after you have the ticket, when you go to court, you have to pay for court costs. It's so much different taxes that they impose on you. But it's already, like, you're asking a question that's already been answered. The consent decree already answered all these questions. That they make millions and billions from ticketing people on a daily basis. They sit at the park and they wait. Like the day prior to the video that you just saw here, when I walked up to the police at the intersection, they were at the park waiting for anybody that came out of the park, and they were ticketing them. This day was on the main street, Orange Street, where they were at ticketing people. So on a daily basis, they're strategically placed all around the city to get as much tickets as they can to fund what they want to fund in the city, which is themselves, which is their institution.
Do we see police in the ironbound in these numbers? Portuguese community, or is it specifically black communities? Like, what are we talking about?
There's nobody that escapes it. If you live in the ironbound, wherever you live at, if you live in North, they will get you. I mean, so it's like, it's really all the people of color that live in this space. I mean, like, if I go to Cranford, my wife used to work there. I used to go pick her up from work. I used to have, like, every 2 months, 3 months, I had a court case because the police pulled me over. And when I got inside the courtroom, there was nothing but black and Spanish people. In Cranford, it's like 80% white people. But when I'm sitting in the courtroom, because I have a sociology degree, and like wherever I go, my antennas are up. So I'm watching to see who's in the crowd, who's in the who is there paying. And it's all black and Spanish people that don't live in Cranford. So it's like, it's not like you said earlier, Brian, it's not only in North.
The issue, I mean, is if you're a person of color and you're in a community of color, you're likely to get pulled over, ticketed, and fined. And if you're in a white community, you're likely to get, you're likely to get pulled over and fined. So we can see, how, this, and we don't want to just limit it to the state of New Jersey. I think we're all from there, so we can all relate. But certainly, it doesn't take a dummy to hear, you connect, Minnesota, and we hear reports like this all over the country to know enough that it's systemic in police.
I was on a mini vacation with my wife. She was helping. There's a program that she's helping out, like the educational component. And we were in Virginia. We're passing through Virginia, and she says, "I'm going to drive through Culper. I don't want you driving through the town of Pep because we'll get pulled over and you'll get a ticket." She's like, "I'll drive." And there's certain areas where she's like, "I'll drive," because if I get caught and you get caught, it's two different issues. I was like, "All right, fine, you drive." But I mean, it's not just New Jersey, and it's not just Missouri. It's the entire country. We see it everywhere. It's Newark. It's everywhere.
But like you were saying earlier, in Ferguson, they put the report out. I think that was like 2012, 2013, or 14, where they exposed it. But nothing really changes, man. The system stays in place. Yo, I'm gonna tie this together. Give me a second. But you were talking about Simone and the mental health and all of that stuff. Yo, the way I feel about mental health is different. Yo, I believe all these things that's going on in our society is what's causing our mental health. Like if you wake up and you can't pay your bills, your unemployment about to run out, they're about to deport you. You've been in the United States your entire life. You have children and they're about to deport you. That is pressure that you put on human beings. And when they go home, like you can use drugs, you can go to medicate yourself with drugs to try to escape the reality, but it doesn't change us. Yo, the only thing that changes our mental health is us participating and donating and giving money to the groups that's fighting to end these things. Because you could do whatever you want to do, man. If you don't fight this, get on the streets, like do these podcasts. Like I keep saying it. I don't think you really understand, Brian, how important these mediums are for people. We need to be able to reach each other, to connect, to let each other know what's going on. Because like the lawyer was saying, he explained the whole consent decree. We went through all the stages. The ACLU sued. And we came up with a consent decree. We paid $8 million. $8 million Peter Harvey was given for the consent decree. And what did we get? The police are kicking ass. They're whooping ass every day. I'm telling you, these videos are all over. The police are whooping ass in our community, and nobody's being held accountable. That woman, her name is Annabelle Serenity Barinas. She was the one that was whooping on them two women. I mean, it's like there's no desk duty, there's no accountability, there's nobody you could speak to. When you call Peter Harvey's office, the person that we gave $8 million to watch over North, You can't get none of these people. Yo, I've given up on them. I've washed my hand of the entire system, of the institutions. I think we need to all walk away from them because they have proven not to give a damn about us. So whenever they say stuff, like they show Simone as a black person, I'm supposed to have all this sympathy. Oh, she going through all this stuff. Now, I mean, she depressed. Hey, yo, by her going home and taking days off, that changes nothing. That does not change the material conditions. And after the Olympics is over, she's going to be rich. They're going to move on with their lives, and we're still going to be suffering. So if you want to get my mental health right, fix these conditions. Change how this institution functions, and we're going to be good.
I'm gonna come back around to you. So we're not done with you yet, but it is getting late, and I want to make sure that everybody gets a few minutes here towards the end to get their final thoughts. And I know we always leave these things. I mean, honestly, I feel like we could probably sit here for another hour or two, but I have to cook dinner for my wife. So I do have to go myself.
I gotta go too.
Exactly, but let's start off with Bennett before we go. Please give us your final thoughts, and if you got anything to plug, man, you got any events or anything coming up, please feel free to do it. Don't be fundraising for Democrats on my network. All right, that's all I ask.
What I want to plug at the moment is to remind everybody that this week is the anniversary of when the United States dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. And I'll be with the Solidarity Singers, I guess tomorrow night, down in Princeton. We'll be attending a commemoration of that, which will include, it fell on August 6th, everybody says, but in the United States, the time was actually 7:15 p.m. on August 5th of United States time, East Coast time. And at that moment, we'll be having a moment of silence. And in addition to our music, there are some excellent speakers. But that's a cause that often people don't pay attention to. Nuclear disarmament, with global warming, they're, to my mind, the two most important things because they're completely existential for everybody, which is not to downplay the importance of the day-to-day issues, but I would hope everybody would do something to commemorate it, including, contacting elected officials, etc., and saying no funding to modernize our nuclear weapons, no funding to increase the defense budget, and pushing for more arms control and de-escalation. So that's what I want to plug this week. In terms of what was said, I agree with Afrika 100% that the courts and the system are not designed to deliver what we need in so many ways. The courts, the system is basically designed to preserve the status quo and existing power. I mean, whoever has power has the advantage in court. I mean, I spend most of my career representing unions, and the only time a union has the advantage in court is when it's being sued by one of its members or employees. when it's suing management, or the corporations, it operates at a disadvantage in court because it's like when you're in everything I really need to know about law. I learned on the playground when I was 6 years old. Finders keepers, losers weepers, and possession is 9/10 of the law. If you have the power to act, at most the law catches up, and at most the law is ameliorative. And we end up settling most of the time instead of going for a total win, because you can't be sure you're going to get the total win, and you want to collect what you can when you can collect it and do what you think is in the best interest of your clients. It's only real organizing in the street and constant demand pushing for these things that is going to make a change. And it's not going to be easy because the people don't really all agree as to what we need and what the solution. I think the election of Eric Adams in New York City is a good example of that, because he combined this image that, well, yes, there are a lot of problems with the police, and I've shown you that I can fight the police, from, his story about how he fought the police for reform when he was a police officer. But, we do need the police. So the question is, basically a reformist thing. And that proved popular. I mean, from the poll results I've seen, that proved popular in working class communities of people in color. And the people who were getting more of the votes for a more radical position on the police, a lot of their strongest districts were populated by people like me, not just white people, but even more upperly mobile, professional people who made it and aren't actually living on the streets. So it's that organizing and the education that's so important, and it's the only thing that can make the difference. And I think we're gonna, I have a lot of problems with Biden, and I don't want to get into the discussion at the beginning of the thing. I think he's made more progress than I believed he would have when he was elected. He hasn't done on much on some things, but it also shows that he's movable if there is real protest. And we do have to be in the streets and do it. I mean, what we saw in this moratorium, there was a lousy opinion issued by Judge Kavanaugh as a single judge on the moratorium, saying, well, I'm not going to enjoin it now before you bring your case to a full panel of the court, because it's going to expire anyway in August. But if it was going on longer than that, I probably would. And from that, Biden's people were telling him, well, the courts are going to strike it down based upon this decision out of the Supreme Court justice on an interim basis. But there was a widespread movement saying this was wrong, led by the member of the squad from St. Louis,
Cory Booker.
Right, and he budged. And it's only being in the streets that's going to get people to budge. And I think we're not done seeing the effects of the Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, the Me Too movement. Look at the shape that Cuomo's in today. That would never happen, but for the widespread organization and people speaking out all across the country to change the attitude of this whole country about the way women are treated at work. I agree with Africa 100%. That's the only thing that makes change. Don't count on those lawyers to be able to win it. That worked a bit when it was the Brennan court, when it was the Warren court, and really the Brennan court that followed the Warren court. He wasn't the Chief Justice, but he was the most influential justice there, with Thurgood Marshall at his side. And those days are gone. We now have a tremendously reactionary court. This court, if this court had Dred Scott in front of it on the state of the law that's there, I have no doubt that they would come out the same way that the court came out in Dred Scott.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot. Like I said, I do know we could talk for hours and learn a lot more, but like I said, we got to get going. I'm going to let Afrika, I know you guys might have a few final thoughts before we go. I wish you had more time. I know you wish you had more time, but let's get the important stuff out of the way before we go home.
Got you. Now I have to say RIP to Glenn Ford from the Black Agenda Report. I mean, I'll be remiss if I didn't say that. I've met him a couple of times, but I really didn't know him. What I knew was his work. Like coming home, reading his work and studying his work enabled me to see politics for what it is. I mean, like we talking about Eric Adams. Only 26% of Democrats came out to vote in that election because most of the people don't care no more, man. Most of the people know whoever they vote for, they're getting the same stuff. So it's like the people of New York didn't vote for Eric Adams. 26% of a targeted group went out and gave us Eric Adams. So he's not really for us. But look, if you want to support these people, the Rodwell family, they had to get a legal defense. Like the lawyer said, you got to pay for these things. Ain't nothing free. You can't go out there expecting lawyers that have bills to come out and do work for free. So they need to get paid. So the mother's cash app is $MONIQUE Rodwell, RODWELL. That's one word, Monique Rodwell, $Monique Rodwell. Yo, if you can, please donate some money to the family so they can fight back. One of the brothers is still locked up as we speak. The other three are home now, and they're gonna fight their case from the streets. But their brother, the one with the child, the one that they started beating on, he's still locked up. So if you want to help the family, please send that out. We have a camp. It's part of in Pantherism, because I'm a Black Panther too. In Pantherism, you have to create dual contending powers to try to fight back against the institutions in place. So for the last 12 years, we have a camp every summer to give the kids something to do from all day. So if you want to help us out, we have a cash fund, $ I live for the people. I live for the people. Please, if you have it, you can send it. If you don't, man, we understand. We understand people catching hell out here. And yeah, you can reach me on Facebook. Everything. I don't have a big platform. I do the podcast, which is on All Power to the People channel on YouTube, and I have a Facebook page, MA_ATMYS on Facebook. And if you want to help, man, like this is how you you donate and help. Even here, look, we need Brian to stay on, man. We need Brian Christian. We need y'all to stay on. You laugh. You think I'm gassed. I'm telling you, as a sociologist.
No, I appreciate it. I'm not laughing. I'm smiling because I feel the love. 500 miles out here, I feel the love. So I appreciate that, man.
Because even my friends be like, yo, who is Brian? When I posted it on my page, somebody like, who are these people? I don't know them. I'm like, tune in and get to know them. I mean, because their people are probably saying, who is Africa? And we have to learn how to connect. We have to all connect. If we don't, they're going to keep us separated. And they're going to keep us picking people like Eric Adams to lead us. Somebody that's been a cop his whole life. But like, who else could you have voted for? If you couldn't vote for if you didn't want Eric Adams, who else could you vote for? There's nobody else there. The progressive candidate has been on MSNBC for the last 10 years, has been working for law firms that's oppressing the people. Leah Whitley, whatever her name is, that's supposed to be the progressive candidate. So like there's nobody to vote for. And that's why people are not showing up. But we need to have these spaces where we can talk to people. Because if we can't, they control the narrative. Yo, I love you guys, man. Whenever you need me, I'm pulling up. Whenever you need, I'm here, man. But I love you guys. Continue doing the work, y'all. All power to the people.
All power to the people, man. Thanks a lot, Africa. Appreciate you being here. And he's a guy that comes on the show a lot. So before and then finally, Christian, we made it. I kept you up late.
We made
but all the time is yours. If you got a final thought, go ahead. All the time in the world is yours, and then I'll
check out the New Jersey Revolution Radio episode we did with Sam Yang. It was a goodie. Had a good conversation. Talked about some issues. Talked about left martial arts culture. If you get a chance, out the episode. Check out the Southpaw podcast. I'm going to talk to my wife to see if she's doing anything next Wednesday night. I would like to know. I'm going to see what I can do. Other than that, check me out on Twitter at Perez Podcast. Check me out on Facebook. You can look me up, Christian Perez. You could find me my other page, Modernity, and I'm available on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you podcast. Modernity and Absurdity, the podcast. Check out my posts, check out my podcast, and if you can, give Revolution Radio, njrevolutionradio.com/donate.
All right. Thank you very much, man. We'll see you again real soon. Christian Perez, great friend of the show, and just, I mean, an overall supporter or a member of our editorial board. And look, we're going to take a few weeks off. I know those of you that tune into the IDAVOX report is off for the month. NJRR Live is taking some vacation, so we'll probably only do a couple shows this month. And I know I'm taking off next week, so you know, we're enjoying our time off in the end of summer before I got to send my kids back to school in September, and then I promise you I'll have a little more time and energy for Revolution Radio. And it's because of our editorial board and their donations that we keep this thing going. I'm going to have to start to make some phone calls to raise some money because, you know, I want to come back right now. If you notice, yes, I am in the middle of the woods. But the reason for that is I have a good cell phone signal out here and I can stream to you. And, you know, if you were in, you know, we're trying to tune into the last couple, I wasn't really happy. I pay attention to these productions, and while we are grassroots and they don't have a $1 billion to plow into the network, you know, the sound quality and my ability to reach you and effectively communicate is important to me, and it's important to Revolution Radio. And so we're going to have to, you know, get a few more pieces of equipment and upgrade the studio, but we're not far off. And quite honestly, you know, I just put out a couple of calls in private meetings and a few DMs, and the response so far to my fundraising has been tremendous. And I want to thank everybody that's given some money. But if you want to save me having to pick up the phone, if you know me and you know you're going to get a call anyway, or you know you're on the email list and you're going to get the email blast, or you're going to have to look at the posts begging for money on Facebook, if you want to save me all that time and energy, please go to www.njrevolutionradio.com/donate. And make a contribution. The links all over our Facebook pages. If you have any problems donating, DM us through the social media. We'll get back to you. We'll get you to where you need to go so that you can give us a financial contribution, and it will be appreciated. And you'll see it reflected in the way this network, you know, broadcasts the revolution. And, we can do that from up here in the woods with your support. I started off the show talking about Simone Biles and how I hope that trickles down. And I hope that people were listening to the kind of activism and the kind of, you know, risk that Afrika is taking out there. And I hope you take some of the stuff you learned during that conversation into your everyday life, because that's the fabric of revolution. That's the fabric of, you know, change is not just coming on here and listening to other people tell stories about how they're trying to change the world, but thinking about, you know, how maybe in your own little way at work, at home with your family, in your church or your place of worship, your synagogue, your mosque, whatever. I hope that, you know, you can find some of these things that you were inspired by, and you said, you know what, I want to make change in that way. You know, maybe you don't want to run around Newark filming every cop you see. I can understand not wanting to do that, and if you're willing to do that, we're going to help support you here at Revolution Radio and help amplify your message. But maybe there's another way that you can support your community and defend them from overly aggressive police. You know, what we saw tonight are some examples of what we know is all too common in our country. But it really is up to the people that take up the struggle and arm themselves with cameras. I mean, really, you see all the time cameras turning into weapons against the police, and it can be effective. And, you know, I film police, you know, I don't see them much anymore, but, you know, I know when I lived in the area, I certainly filmed police quite a lot myself. And it was always an effective tactic to let them know that you're there. And what they're doing is, it could be broadcast to the world. It makes them think. And I think over the last few years, people filming the police have saved a lot of lives. That, you know, you're not going to hear those stories because there was a camera there. The police behaved themselves a little better. So I encourage that, and you heard Attorney Bennett Zarofsky encourage that tonight as well. So I hope that's something you learned tonight, and I hope you learned a lot more. Tune in. Just because I'm on vacation and we're not doing the podcast as much doesn't mean our social media won't be lighting up with clever memes and little clips of shows from the past, all the guests and the highlights and all that stuff's going to be all over. So like our social media pages. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page. Contribute a little money. But we'll be back on a Wednesday night at 8 p.m. right here, streaming out YouTube and all that stuff. So just stay engaged with us. And until we see you again, this is Brian Powers, and I want to remind everybody out there that the police can quit their jobs. Good night, everybody.
Thrown against the car, handcuffed, and that's what happened last night.
The police kicked in the door, shot him twice in the chest, and died.
Before you knew it, we had 500 families. We had over 100 volunteers calling us. We were on the phone constantly.
I can't get it, and I got one police department telling me they don't know who's in charge. I got another police department here. Everybody's got a gun, and nobody knows who's in charge. Did anybody figure out who's in charge yet? Is there anybody in charge here? Any police officer in charge? Are you in charge? I can't find anybody in charge. That's the problem.